Funny how some people just don't seem to be able to get on with each other. Just because someone has a different colour skin or they live in another kind of street, you'd think they came from Mars, the way they're misunderstood. Something which happened at our garage made me think about this kind of thing. I always thought we were a pretty friendly lot here until Mr. Rumbelow, the manager, had a foreign car delivered. How wrong I was. Oh, we're all right now, but it's quite a story. This is what happened. Snoopy Sneer, the yellow sports car, had just got back from a trip when Mr. Rumbelow came up to him.
"A new car is being delivered today, Snoopy Sneer,"
he said.
"She is from abroad, and she is being parked next to you. She is rather special, so just you behave and make friends with her."
All the other cars were excited to see what the new car'd be like, but Snoopy Sneer sulked all day. He was cross with Mr. Rumbelow, the manager. Snoopy wasn't going to have a foreign car parked close to him. He was sure a foreign car would smell. He would keep himself to himself. He got Bert the mechanic to paint a thick white line round him so that the new car would have to keep her distance. It was while Snoopy Sneer was on a trip to Manchester that Japonica, the new car, was delivered, gleaming, immaculate, shy and smiling. She parked carefully in her place, leaving plenty of room for Snoopy Sneer when he come back. Late in the evening, Snoopy Sneer swished into the garage, blaring his three-note horn and flashing his eyes in Japonica's face, making sure he had woken her up. He parked as noisily as he could, muttering to himself about the yellow peril. "Go to sleep, go to sleep," mumbled all the other cars, but Snoopy Sneer carried on blustering until he saw that Japonica was quietly crying. Satisfied, he settled down to sleep. I was furious. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Snoopy Sneer," I said. "You're being rotten to Japonica and you don't even know her." But Snoopy Sneer just yawned. The next morning, while Bert was giving him a wash, Snoopy Sneer was in good spirits. He could see that Japonica was still looking sad, and he felt very proud of himself. He could think up a few more tricks yet. It was soon time for Japonica to go off on her first journey. Bert checked her engine and filled her with petrol. "You've got a long day ahead of you, my beauty," he said. "So work hard and do well. We want to be proud of you." "I wouldn't trust her with one of our customers," said Snoopy Sneer to the world in general. "You can never tell with foreigners what they will do. They're not the same as us." Some of the other cars laughed and agreed with him, but I scowled at him, hoping he would shut up. Japonica pretended not to hear them. She was off on her first journey, and she was gonna do it well. She sounded her horn chirpily and set off to take a passenger to the airport. On the way, she got held up in a traffic jam. A travelling circus was coming to town for the bank holiday, and poor Japonica got stuck behind a huge lorry with two giraffes leaning their heads out the back. To her horror, Japonica noticed that the bolt on the back of the van seemed to be loose. Driver, do hurry," said the lady sitting in the back of Japonica. She was wearing a large, flowery hat and looked very pretty. "I mustn't miss my flight. I'm due in New York for a wedding." Japonica sounded her horn. The two giraffes looked startled and shook their heads at her, and just then there was a tremendous noise. Honk, honk, blare, blare. It was Snoopy Sneer. He thought it'd be fun to frighten Japonica in some difficult traffic. Honk, 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 blare, blare. He roared past, determined to unnerve her. When he come to overtake the circus lorry, he had to swerve in front of it rapidly to avoid an oncoming car. The lorry braked sharply. The loose bolt was jostled out of place, and with a crash, bang, the loading ramp fell onto the road and outran the startled giraffes. Japonica jammed on her brakes but could not stop in time. One of the giraffes sprawled over her bonnet, kicking 2 deep dents in it. The lady screamed and her flowery hat flew through the window. Confusion followed. Cars and lorries piled up. People came running from all directions, and the animals panicked. 3 men appeared carrying a vast net. With a clever swish and a flick, they caught one of the animals and hauled it off Japonica. The second was soon bundled back into the van too. "My plane! My plane!" cried the lady, cramming her flowery hat back on her head. While the men were bolting the van again, Japonica managed to overtake it. By now, of course, Snoopy Sneer, who'd caused all the trouble, was miles away. The driver put his foot down, and Japonica flew along toward the airport at top speed. She was still aching badly from all the dents in her bonnet, but she hurried on, determined to get to that airport on time. Just as she drew up, the announcer was calling for passengers for the morning flight to New York to assemble. The lady jumped out, clutching her hat. "Thank you, Japonica," she called. "You were wonderful to get me here on time." And she ran off to join her plane. When Japonica got back to the garage, aching and bruised all over, the other cars crowded round her to hear all about her adventures, and Bert and Mr. Rumbelow rushed out to see what damage had been done to her. Except Snoopy Sneer. He pretended not to listen and spent the time admiring his own reflection in my bumper. "Fancy not being able to avoid a giraffe," sneered Snoopy to himself. Mr. Rumbelow and Bert the mechanic were very sorry for Japonica. "Oh, that wasn't your fault," they reassured her. "You'll soon look as good as new. We'll get hold of a new bonnet as quickly as we can. Meanwhile, you rest here and get over your shock." "She can rest as long as she likes. She's only taking work from us." Some of the other cars agreed with Snoopy, but some of them told him not to be so unkind. Within a week, the bonnet came and was fitted. Bert was as quick as he could be because he saw how disappointed Japonica was at not working. "The manager has a couple of jobs lined up for you tomorrow," he told her, "so cheer up." Japonica was kept busy the next morning, and everything went well. She took a businessman to a conference, and then a group of trades union officials to see their MP. In the afternoon, she was tired but glad to be back at the garage. While she was being cleaned and checked over by Bert, the phone rang. It was a message to say that Snoopy Sneer's windscreen had shattered on the motorway, and his passenger wanted another car immediately.
"You'll have to go,"
said Rumbelow to Japonica.
"You are the only car available. You will have to pick up Snoopy's passengers and take them on to Birmingham."
Poor Japonica. She did not look forward to that. What would Snoopy Sneer say when she came to get his passengers? She roared quickly up the motorway, rather dreading the meeting. At the service station, Japonica could see Snoopy Sneer's forlorn outline waiting for her. He looked very cross and sulky. 2 men were waiting with the boot open, unloading luggage. Japonica drove in discreetly. She did not want to offend Snoopy Sneer. Her driver jumped out and went over to talk to the others. Parked nearby was a large tanker containing liquid chemical. Japonica admired its bulky shape, and she idly watched the autumn leaves float down and land on it. Suddenly, Japonica saw something that startled her. A steady drip, drip was coming from the tanker's side. It had a leak. Dangerous liquid was slowly escaping. Japonica panicked. She did not know what to do. She could not move, and her driver was deep in conversation with Snoopy's driver. The tanker's driver had just come out of the cafe and was pausing to admire Snoopy's smooth curves. While Japonica was wondering what to do, it happened. A passerby casually flicked his cigarette, and away it landed right in the middle of the pool of chemical. A flame flickered over the surface of the puddle. There was a shout from the lorry driver. He ran with pounding steps and leapt into the cab, started the engine, and at full speed drove towards a clump of bushes at the far end of the car park. As he did so, there was a huge explosion. Buildings were shaken, people were flung to the ground, and the tanker driver was hurled through the windscreen into the bushes. Snoopy, Sneer, and Japonica were both blown across the ground. Their windows shattered. Dented and shaken, they landed almost on top of each other. Snoopy Sneer was the first to speak. "We might have been blown to pieces, all of us, if it hadn't been for that driver. Do you think he's all right? He saved us, you know, Japonica. He saved us." Japonica looked at him in amazement. Was this Snoopy Sneer actually talking to her, Japonica, in a kind voice? "I thought I was a goner for the moment," Snoopy Sneer went on. "Are you all right, Japonica? You look a bit knocked about. I saw you sail through the air, and I suddenly thought how rotten I've been to you, and the mean tricks I'd played, just because you're foreign. And, Japonica, I'm sorry. I do want to be friends." "Oh, so do I," said Japonica quickly. "Do let's be friends. I know I'm different in a lot of ways, but really, we are all very similar under the bonnet." Just then their drivers staggered rather shakily over to them. "We'd better see if their engines start, and then we'd better take some of these wounded people to hospital. I don't think shattered windscreens matter now." Fortunately, neither of their engines seemed damaged. Off they roared down the motorway, horns blaring as if they were ambulances. Japonica did enjoy it. When they got to the hospital, the press and TV cameras were there waiting for them. They crowded round, asking questions and filming. Japonica and Snoopy felt very proud. At last they got back to the garage. What a reception they got there. Bert rushed out to greet them, and all the cars blared their horns. "You check over Japonica first," said Snoopy Sneer. "She's had a nasty time, and she's in a bit of a state. You look after her. I can wait." Yes, that accident was a dreadful business. It shook us all up, but it certainly made us see things differently. Take Snoopy Sneer, for example. He and Japonica have become good friends, telling each other stories and helping each other whenever they can. We may all be in our looks and in our customs, but there is so much that we share in common. This stands out a mile if you think about it, but the crazy thing is that it took a near disaster before Snoopy Sneer could see that Japonica is not just a foreigner, but is a car like himself. Life in the garage has settled down happily now, and all the cars work together as a team, which I suppose is what you humans do. Or do you have problems too?